EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome in, everybody, a Football Friday edition of Birds 365, June 21st here with you. 77 days until the Eagles kick off their NFL season in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and 76 days until the NFL kicks off. Johnny Mac, good Friday morning to you, sir. How you doing?
Yeah. How was the wedding? That's first, number one. We got to see how Zander Krause is doing
out there with all the family. Ran into a loyal JAKIB Sports listener. Hopefully, he's listening right now. Great stuff. You know, I'm out there on the dance floor. My cousin got married. She's a girl, obviously, and her now husband, one of his groomsmen, was there, and my uncle's like, "I got to introduce you," and you know, it was pretty cool. So me and my pops got a chance to meet him. And it's always cool. We talked about it a little bit yesterday on the show. When you're out and you run into somebody that listens to the show, it's pretty awesome. So I got a chance to do that, see all my cousins and my family. It was great. Really good time, and struggling a little bit, but we're back and we're good. And 8 a.m. is here, and we are ready to rock on Birds 360.
Yeah, that 8 a.m. That early wake up call. That's in week wedding. Yeah, that's gonna hurt the early wake up call.
In week, I mean, I knew all along that was going to be a tough swing, but all good. Happy to be here. Happy to get a chance to talk Eagles on this morning. It's a nice morning. Welcome everybody in this morning. Lil G, Daz, Nikki, SMD, Eagles, South Jersey. What's going on? Mike Fittery. What's going on, everybody? We appreciate you all being here this morning. Make sure you guys drop a like on the show this morning. We got a good show planned. We got Paul Domowich coming up in hour number 1, and we got Ed Kratz coming up in hour number 2. So 2 good guests for you. And we'll talk a lot. Me and Johnny Mac are going to continue our conversation from yesterday where we kick around some of the Eagles opponents. Some of these guys are a little bit better than they, than you might think on paper, those first 4 games we ran through yesterday, there was definitely some good competition out there, some good opponents. So Johnny Mac and I will continue to do that. And then a couple more players I want to talk about. Yesterday, we talked about 2 rookies, Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean. So this morning we will kick around a couple other players, Paris Campbell, Isaiah Rodgers. I saw some articles about them. So we will talk about them. Johnny Mac, let's go into the games, though. I want to come into the games. Yesterday, we did the first 4. We talked about Eagles-Packers, which is going to be a tough battle. Eagles-Falcons, which is a little bit of a sleeper game. I think that Falcons team has a chance to be really good. Eagles-Saints, which is a team that you're high on. They have a really good, not high on, but they have a great defense, and you've pointed all the good players they have on their defense. And then Eagles-Bucks, and a little bit of a revenge game there. 2 playoff losses to them in the last 3 years. So a little bit of a revenge factor there. Coming out of the bye week, Johnny Mac, they have the Browns. How do you view the Browns going into this year? They're kind of another team, I think, that has a lot of talent, but they haven't quite, put it all together. How do you view the Browns coming into this year?
Yeah, I'm kind of in that, wait and see mode with Deshaun Watson. I think if he ever becomes the player he once was in Houston before he had all the issues, off the field issues, I think, they would be a legitimate contender. To be honest, that's how much talent they have up and down the roster. So it's a very good team, but anytime you have that uncertainty at quarterback, you saw what they were able to do with Joe Flacco. I mean, that's pretty good from a standpoint of making that playoff run and the stage of the career Joe is at. I think Joe's still a very good backup quarterback, but that might have more to say about backup quarterbacks in this league than anything else, and how few good ones there are. But yeah, I mean, starts with Myles Garrett. I mean, number one, I know they were having some issues with Amari Cooper as far as contract. That's just part of it. The NFL, it's why Hassan Reddick's not here. Let's be honest. So, I mean, everybody's got to deal with those types of issues. Jim Schwartz had that defense kicking on all cylinders near the top of the league. We know how good he is. Kevin Stefanski. And look, they're run by Andrew Berry, who is, a former right-hand man of Howie Roseman here. Now his twin brother, Adam Berry, is here, and he's rising up the Eagles organization very, very quickly. So
I didn't know that. So he has a twin brother who's now with the Eagles, who's with the Eagles now. Andrew has Adam?
Yeah, Adam Berry.
Oh, I didn't know that. What does Adam do for the Eagles? Just one of Howie's
he just got promoted. As a matter of fact, when they were doing their restructuring of the organization, and now he's a vice president of football ops.
Oh, so he's getting up there.
Yeah, and it's funny because he was, working at Goldman Sachs for, I don't know, 15 years and came straight up Wall Street to work for the Eagles. And a lot of the reasons why is because of his brother was so successful. They're both Ivy League guys. They're both really smart from that standpoint. They had a football background from the standpoint of they were very good in high school. They both played college football. Andrew, I believe, was Harvard. Adam was Princeton. So as I said, both Ivy League guys, both very smart guys. So, and Andrew, speaks of, and in fact, during, everybody's got their web shows now, all the individual teams. And in one of the Cleveland sort of clips of the draft, they showed Andrew's office out there, and he's got a Howie Roseman quote up on his whiteboard. So my point is Howie's been a tremendous mentor to him. He knows how to build a team, and it shows in Cleveland.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. And then, now his brother's obviously working here with Howie. So that's obviously a good relationship there with Howie and that family. But John, what going back to the Browns, what the heck happened to Deshaun Watson? I mean, I know you remember, obviously, because we talked about it on this damn show. Once upon a time, before Jalen Hurts burst onto the scene in the NFL after his first 9-win season or whatever it was, half this town was clamoring for us to go and get him. I was one of them. I was like, look, if you can get a guy that's a proven top 5.
So were the Eagles, I would say.
I mean, if you were a top 5 quarterback, go and do it. And he just doesn't look like that guy anymore. He has really struggled since he's been back. I know he had the year off, but geez, I mean, he really fell off a cliff. What happened to Deshaun Watson? I guess.
Well, if you go to Isaiah Rodgers and just talking about, I was concerned about the year off. I think a lot of people think, rust is not real for some reason. And I think Deshaun Watson's the opposite. It was more than a year. So, that hurt him. He was a no doubt about it, top 10 quarterback in the NFL before his legal issues. And I'm not going to feel sorry for that goofball, but anyway, that's another conversation.
Yeah.
You could argue he was on the cusp of being top 5. He was that good
At that time. I think he might have been. Remember, he took the Texans to the playoffs, and he got that playoff win. I mean, he got real good for a second there, Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, and the guy who came back is not the same guy, or hasn't been to this point. Now he's still young enough to where maybe maybe the light switch comes back on, so to speak. But right now, I mean, yeah, you could argue they were a better team last year when he went down, which is not a good situation. And Joe Flacco, as we said, they had the great run at the end of the season. They have a lot of talent. They've added Jerry Jeudy to Amari Cooper. I assume they're going to work things out. Nick Chubb has been one of the better running backs in the NFL. Very good offensive line. They're another team. It's funny you talk about the most talented teams. They all have good offensive lines. When you talk about those best rosters, and the Browns are in that conversation as well. And Jim is just, can't say enough good things about Jim Sports on the defensive side of the football. They're going to be good. It's a matter of how good. And they got everything. They got the best, in my opinion, the best edge rusher in football and Myles Garrett. But they also have Zadarius Smith, who's getting older. But, man, when he's out there, he's still effective. Dalvin Tomlinson's a good defensive tackle. They have good linebackers. Jordan Hicks is still playing, man. And they got Jordan Hicks this year. But Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is one of the best linebackers in football, 3 down linebackers. He's very good. Denzel Ward is still one of the better corners in this league. The safeties, Grant Delpit, Juan Thornhill, they're good. Yeah, they're a cusp of top 5. They're certainly a top 10 roster, and they're in a conversation for being a top 5 roster, I would say, as well. That's how good they are. Talent.
It's an interesting setup, John, these first games. I mean, yesterday, for anybody that missed yesterday's show, Johnny Mack and I ran through the Eagles' first 4 opponents and just kind of gave, a little rundown, Johnny Mack's thoughts on each team going into the year this year, some of the roster, some of the things that, if you're focused on the Eagles, you wouldn't be as, aware of. And we hit on some of that. A theme I'm picking up on is Falcons, Raheem Morris, Saints, Dennis Allen, Bucks, Todd Bowles, and Cleveland has Jim Schwartz. They have a little bit of a gauntlet of really good defensive coaches that they're going to have to play against. Guys that understand moments, situations, certain type of quarterbacks. And, in the past, Todd Bowles has been pretty good at game planning for a Jalen Hurts-led offense. Obviously, we saw the 2 playoff games. That's going to be tough. I mean, that's going to be tough for an offense that's going to be brand new, trying to piece it together, trying to get in rhythm. And you're going to have these seasoned, defensive guys who are going to know how to throw different looks their way. That'll be an interesting theme to watch early in the year.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good coaches in the NFL, and now the Eagles are back in that conversation where people think Vic Fangio is going to make a big difference, and I'm among that group of people. But yeah, anytime, and that was a concern. Now, I wouldn't go too far to, it helps that Jim has Myles Garrett and some of those players I mentioned. It's still, I always say, talent first, good or bad. Or indifferent. It's always the players first. And we got to see Myles Garrett, Eagles reporters, up close last year, and it was something, man. When a player like that comes in, you see his ability to dominate against a very good offensive lineman, against a very good offensive line. The Eagles didn't know what to do with him. But that's practice where you're not game planning and you're just going out and saying, all right, poor Jordan that day, go block him. Obviously, and the best example of that is Aaron Donald over the years, where the Eagles get a lot of credit for never giving up a sack to Aaron Donald. And they played, obviously they're not division rivals, but they played quite a few times. And, a lot of fans try to puff out their chests about that and how good the Eagles offensive line is. And Jason has talked about this, Jason Kelsey. He's like, you don't know what the hell we did to stop that guy. Everything. Yeah. We never left him on an island, ever. The only player, according to Jason, they never even had one play where it wasn't designed to have 2 different people on at least Aaron Donald. Every protection was slid to Aaron Donald. To the point, Aaron, those 2 talk about each other. It's great because they have such respect for each other. And Aaron got very frustrated by that. And he was like, man, just leave me alone for a play. Because everybody does, there's other things you're trying to do. Right. The Eagles never did. They were very disciplined about it, and they had tremendous success. So it does change, practice. You're just going out there practicing, when you game plan, and you're going to see it because that's going to be, I guarantee you, Brown's week, as long as he's healthy, as long as he's out there, that's going to be number 1. That's going to be how do you block Myles Garrett? That's going to be the whole Eagles game plan right there. I mean,
when you have a guy that's that good, that can wreck a game. And look, I like that philosophy. I mean, I'd rather dedicate 2 to him all game long, maybe have some sort of a weakness somewhere else on the field because of it. But at least I'm not gonna let Aaron, in this case, Myles Garrett ruin the game, or in the Rams case.
Yeah, and sometimes Aaron you can't. The Rams at times didn't have great supporting cast, whereas Cleveland probably has a better supporting cast. If you leave Zadarius Smith by himself, he's going to hurt you at times. Inside, as I mentioned, Dalvin Tomlinson's still a pretty good player, so you got to be careful with that. depending on the sporting cast as well. So, but that's what makes it difficult. And I guarantee you, Jim Sports is going to make it difficult for them.
Yeah, so I don't want to get into our next team just because we have Damo coming up probably at 8:20. That's when he's scheduled.
Too wordy already.
Yeah. Well, no, you're good. We have the Giants coming up next. That's our first NFC East opponent of the. It would be.
You're not going to hear many good things about the Giants.
Yes, yeah, not much to talk about with them, but I don't know. I think you don't think they have any chance to get a little better this year, the Giants? I think the Commanders do.
I think they have to get better. They're going to get better because Daniel Jones is an NFL quarterback. I mean, he's not a great NFL quarterback, but he's a legitimate starting quarterback. And what they were throwing out there last year when he was hurt was pretty stinking bad when they got down to Tommy DeVito. Tyrod Taylor was okay, and obviously he hurt the Eagles. So, yeah, they're going to be better because Daniel Jones is out there. But, yeah, I don't, this might be it for Brian Daboll. And I'm disappointed because when Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen first got there, I thought they're finally making some good decisions, going the right direction, and it just came completely off the rails again.
Yeah, I mean, he won Coach of the Year, and I'm sitting there watching the ceremony. I'm like, this Giants team could finally, get back to contending in the NFC East, give us a little bit of a, competition in those games. It hasn't panned out ever since that first year when he won Coach of the Year. It's really been all downhill. Now they have had a lot of problems, a lot of injuries, and he didn't get along with.
Yeah, but he's fighting with his coaching staff, and it's like, what's going on? What is going on with the Giants? They gotta figure some stuff out.
Yeah, so if our resident Commander fan, James Jones, is in the chat. James, I think your Commanders are going to be looking a little better than the Giants are right about now. I think they're on their way up at least, which is a good thing. Let's get to our commercial break, Johnny Mac. Good breakdown of the Cleveland Browns. I tell you what, there is some sleeper games. I mean, it's the NFL, so every game is important, but certainly no Panthers in that or a team like that in that first couple weeks. I mean, we did yesterday, Packers, Falcons, Saints, Bucks. 4 solid teams, no gimmies there. And then Cleveland Giants we talked about so far. I think the Giants are probably the easiest game of those first 6 opponents. You have a bye week thrown in there, but definitely some good talented teams. So the Eagles will have their work cut out for them in the beginning of the year, especially with new coordinators, trying to get everything going, trying to get everything in rhythm. So a lot to watch out for, a lot to look for. Let's get to our first commercial break. Before I do that, I'm going to welcome everybody in. I want to thank everybody for being here this morning. Twiz, Eduardo, Mike, Daz, Mark, Bornman, Time. What's up, everybody? We appreciate you guys being here. Make sure you drop a like on the show. Stay tuned. Paul Domowitch is in, and he will join us next on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Is the best vacation one that you find, or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights, or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm, or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Win and save this baseball season from Colony Pools and Power Washing, a local company serving Delaware, Delco, and Chester County since 1970. Are you tired of looking at your greenhouse? Is your roof, siding, deck stained green from algae and mold? Let the experts pressure wash your home and take the pressure off of you. Win with Colony Pools and Power Washing. Call them now at 302-762-2250. That's 302-762-2250.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction. Go with trust. And go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia Dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles. EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody. A Football Friday edition of Birds 365 today, joined now by Paul Domowitch, Hall of Fame selector. Domo, welcome to the show, man. How you doing this Friday?
Doing well. How about you guys?
Doing well. Desperate to get to training camp, Domo. Trying to get some, it's kind of, I do want everybody to enjoy their summer. It's going to be hot, so stay cool today locally, but it is the dead period in the NFL. A couple off-season things were interesting to me yesterday. One is the IR rules. I don't know how I feel about it. The NFL keeps liberalizing these injured reserve rules, Domo. Now, if you're a playoff team, and that's what the Eagles have been, and most people expect them to be, you can bring back 10 players now. You get 8 in the regular season, 2 in the postseason, 10 total. You can designate to return. You and I know when you hit an IR, you were done back in the day. And you had some difficult decisions if a guy was going to be out 8, 9 weeks. Do you need the roster spot? I don't know. It kind of hurts the strategy. And then the second part, you can put 2 guys on IR at the cut down to 53, Damo. You don't have to keep them on the 53, and you can bring them back. I don't like these rules. How do you think? I think it makes it too easy.
It does. I mean, it's clear the NFL wants its teams to be as strong as possible, give them every opportunity to get their best players back if they have, freak injuries or injuries that are going to keep a guy out for a while. But you're right. It takes a lot away from the strategy. If I'm a weaker team in a division, where in the past a great player for another team would go down, you're thinking this is our break. This is, and now it's, he can come back later anyways. So.
Yeah. And waivers, not that it's exciting, but I think you could mine the league and, maybe find somebody on a deep team and make your team better. That becomes more difficult because if you have a young guy who's got like a tweaked hamstring and he's not going to be part of your season early anyway, you just put him on IR. He's out for at least 4 games. Yeah, I don't like it. I think it hurts the strategy and the ability to GM. I'm going to ask Howie that at some point when we ever get to see him again. I wonder what he thinks about it because I think it takes some of the challenge away.
Yeah, and Howie is a strategy guy. I mean, he likes to steal players from other teams. He's big on signing players to futures contracts late in the season. So I would think he's probably not in favor of it. The plus side for him, obviously, is he doesn't lose young guys that he wants to hang on to. So I don't know. I'd be interested in his answer too.
Yeah, Howie's good at stuff like this, though. I love Howie's good at manipulating the things that other GMs don't manipulate well. So we'll see what he ends up doing with that. Dom, I want to ask. I asked Johnny Mack yesterday on the show about the 2 early draft picks for the Eagles this year. And now that the dust has settled from the draft, we're no longer, expecting every player to be all pros this year. You've seen what's come out of the defensive backs room. You have Darius Slay, got a lot of good young guys. How much of a priority is it for the Eagles to get a guy like Quinyon Mitchell on the field in year 1, just from a league perspective, right? I mean, he's a 22nd overall pick. You want to probably get that guy on the field, but there also is a chance that he could sit and learn a little bit. I think there's upsides in both. How does an organization prioritize what to do in that situation?
Well, I mean, they're not going to. I mean, if he's not ready, they can't. They don't want to force him. You know, when you're a playoff team, a Super Bowl contender, the last thing you want is a guy out there on the corner who can't do the job yet. But they need him to. They need him to be good. I mean, they can't get this wrong. Yeah, we're not going to see Bradberry on the corner. He's either going to be gone or he's going to be playing some safety. So, I mean, they really need Mitchell to kind of pan out real quick and hold up right from the start.
How much stock do you put in that thought process of potentially moving Bradberry to safety? Because my thought is, Damo, if you're going to he's not going to be the starter, right? So if you're going to be a backup, you got to help on special teams. And James hasn't played special teams since probably he was a rookie in Carolina. I mean, I can't get past thinking it's lip service. Do you think it's anything more than lip service and trying to push this to get something for him eventually?
I didn't expect him to still be on the team, frankly. So, you know, that surprises me. The fact that he's still here makes me think, okay, I mean, they're trying to find some use for him, and they're not going to give him away. So, you know, I mean, Vic's going to use a lot of people at safety. He's going to use a lot of 3 safety looks. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities for Bradberry to play in Vic's scheme if he indeed can play safety. So, you know, I mean, I don't think it's I mean, I think they're legitimately trying to find a way to use him. But again, I think if somebody comes along, makes them a decent offer or semi-decent offer, they'll take it.
Yeah, we'll see what they end up doing with Bradberry. I'm with you, Damo. I thought he would have been gone by now, especially with the way me and Johnny Mack were talking about it going into this thing. Like, there's no space for him. Just move on from him at this point. But looks like Howie really wants to hold out and see if he can get something from him. So we'll see what they end up doing there. I want to ask you about sorry, I lost my train of thought there. What were we talking about there?
Bradberry. Well, in the Bradberry, to just push that a little bit further, Damo, is the fact that you not only have Mitchell, so you have Mitchell on the outside, you have Eli Ricks. Like, I'm trying to find, how do you keep Eli Ricks and Josh Jobe? I think everybody forgets about, but he might be the best special teams player they have. So you kind of want to find a back end roster spot for him. Inside, I think that's where Cooper DeJean's going to start to try to get him on the field. They want to get him on the field. It's a nice problem to have, but I always say the word problem is part of nice problem. It is a problem. Now, the modern NFL, people are throwing 7 defensive backs on the field at one time. You got glorified safeties playing nickel linebacker. Vic rolled that out with Quinyon Mitchell in minicamp. They're trying to get as many coverage people on the field. Have the Eagles, is this an indication that we're going to see some wacky looks and we're going to see a whole bunch of defensive backs on the field at one time?
Could be. I mean, it all goes back. I always look at 2 years ago as what their ideal approach to football is, and what in Nick's in Nick's world, and it's to jump out to a lead and make teams play catch up.
Yeah,
you can basically ignore the run. Teams have to throw. Your edge rushers and your defensive linemen can just pin their ears back, go after the quarterback, and you can just flood the field with cover people and shut and stop that. That's what they want to do. If they don't do it, then suddenly you got to find a plan B, because suddenly you got to find people that can stop.
You need a linebacker.
Exactly.
Yeah. Which is oof.
Yeah. I'm still concerned about their pass rush. And if that's not good, they're going to have problems on the back end, no matter how many of these people are looking good right now. But we'll see. Better to have. Right now, I understand. I mean, you could look at any position and you really can't make a clear call on who's going. You know, like you look at the slot. They got 4 different people that could play the slot right now. You got, Maddox, who probably is going to start, but is he going to stay healthy? You've got Isaiah Rodgers, who in the spring was outside, but he's an inside guy. They brought Tyler Hall in from the Raiders, and they got DeJean. So, which one of those? I mean, better to have too many guys and hope one. That's always been their attitude, even in the draft. Have as many picks as you can possibly have. You draft 10 guys or 12 guys, you got a better chance of hitting on 3 or 4, as opposed to not having enough picks, and then suddenly you've got to have a higher percentage of success. I think they take the same approach right now, at cornerback and safety. Let's get as many as we can, and hopefully a couple of these guys will be able to play. Whether it's Ricks.
I like that thought, because let's be honest, as impressive as Mitchell and DeJean have looked early, and Ringo, I'm higher on Gailey than all of them. I think he's going to be a really good player. Part of that comes from because A.J. Brown told me that, so I'll trust him. But I guarantee you one thing: all 3 aren't going to be great. But the odds of one being great, that's probably pretty good.
Yeah.
So I like that thought process. I like carpet bombing a position. Obviously, some of it was probably an overreaction to what happened last year, because they are loaded. I mean, we don't even talk about poor Zach McPherson anymore. I remember last year at the cut to 53, the initial cut to 53, Mario Goodrich made the team, and it was a big deal and a big story and a great story. It's like he's not even there anymore, Damo. Poor Mario Goodrich. They have so many bodies. And then they signed Perry Nickerson on he was here as a tryout player at minicamp, and I'm like, and really another corner? And he's played in this league. He was with Vic in Miami last year. They have so many corners. Are they paying too much attention to that position compared to some others?
Well, I don't think you can pay too much attention to that. Look how many touchdown passes they gave up last year. I think it was the 2nd or 3rd most in the league. You don't know about Darius Slay. I mean, he can still play, but can he stay healthy? I mean, he's probably going to be a 12-game player. He'll play well in those 12 games, but he's going to miss 4 or 5. So, I mean, you need to have depth at corner. I mean, there's certain positions where it's critical, and they found out over the years that's one that they need depth at. So, I think they're doing the right thing here, assuming some of these guys can play. I think when they drafted Mitchell and DeJean, in Howie's mind, you think back in your history, and I think he looked back to 2002 and thought about Brown and Shepard when they drafted them, and how they, I don't, are they going to be that lucky, or are they going to be that fortunate with these guys? I don't know, maybe, but you're right. If you can hit even 1 out of 2 or 1 out of 3, it's a better percentage than having to scramble to find guys on the waiver wire.
Damo, I don't want to beat the dead horse on the whole press conference thing, but I feel like the Eagles validated it in a way. Before, it was just media reacting to something Jalen Hurts said. Then you see some reports come out. Key figures inside the organization are upset. Howard Eskin comes out and says Jalen might get Carson Wentz, whatever that means for this year. Just, what do you make of the developments on that front? Yeah, that was what Howard Eskin said on the radio. I'm not sure if you didn't see that, Damo. He said if Jalen doesn't get it, start playing better, he might get Carson Wentz. And like I said, Howard will say.
I don't even know what that means. I said when Howard said that, Damo. I'm like, the Eagles didn't even want a Carson Wentz. They wanted to bring him back. They were going to try to repair it one more time. I remember when Nick was getting interviewed and all the reports came out and they interviewed Kellen Moore. Everybody was getting those, how are you going to fix Carson Wentz questions? Like the Eagles they were like, all right, we're tied to this guy for one more year. And Carson was the one who was like, all right, I'm done with this organization. You benched me. You screwed me by drafting Jalen Hurts. I don't agree with that, but that's sort of Carson's thought process on it. I don't even think the Eagles wanted to Carson Wentz. So I don't know what that verb means, Carson Wentzing someone.
No, I mean, they wanted to fix him. I mean,
yeah.
Doug thought that, okay, we just kind of regroup and go into the next season and get this guy straight and we'll be okay. And then, then Carson said, nah, I just don't want to play for you anymore. So, that's not Jalen. I stopped listening to Howard Eskin in 1972. So.
Yeah, but I do think it's relevant because he's a guy that's so entrenched in the Eagles organization. I don't think he would go out there and make them look worse on this purposefully. He has a Super Bowl ring. His bread is buttered by the Philadelphia Eagles. That's where I'm like, Jeff McClain reports key figures are upset, which is different than Howard Eskin, but I'm just adding the pieces of the puzzle together and I'm saying, well, now it looks like this may be something real that the organization is unhappy with. Maybe there is some sort of thing going on there, not just Johnny Mack and I discussing it on Birds 365 that Jalen Hurts didn't answer something how we wanted them to answer it. I think it validated it in a way, and I wonder if it's more cause for concern.
I mean, what we don't know is the relationship right now between him and Kellen Moore, him and Nick, him and Nussmeier. It needs to be good, but there's no way to tell right now. We don't know how, Jalen has taken to this offense mentally. I mean, is he okay with it? Does he embrace it? Because you got to believe in it. I mean, if you're a quarterback and don't believe in what you're doing, you're screwed. So we don't know all that, but I know Jalen, and and the difference between Jalen and Carson is Jalen is driven to be better. When he knows he played poorly last year in a lot of areas. He knows he's got to get better. I mean, the fact that he quickly went from the mini camp to working out with Saquon tells me something. You didn't see Carson do that. You know what I mean? Yeah. There may be some concern there. I don't know because I don't know the relationship right now between him and Kellen and Nick, but I'm fairly confident that he's going to rebound pretty well this year, assuming everything around him goes well. I think he knows what he did wrong. He knows his shortcomings. Kellen knows what he needs to emphasize with him. We talked about this before, and John, John doesn't like the short pass, and I agree. Jalen probably doesn't like to throw it, but he's going to have to get used to it this year. And whether that could be a problem, whether it's like he's fighting that, I don't know. But he can't throw. I think I had a stat last week in a story I wrote. They had the 8th most 20 plus yard throws in the league last year. But they also had they were middle of the pack or below the middle of the pack in completion percentage in those throws. So, his completion percentage last year was 65. It's got to be better. I mean, that's not a good percentage anymore.
Which is crazy, by the way.
No, it really is. Because
you got to be 73.
Yeah, but because of all the screens and everything, you need to be up near 70 at least, if not over 70. And so, that's what he needs to. I think he'll be a better quarterback this year.
Well, by the way, I think it's typical. It's not that I don't like the short passing game. I don't like it for Jalen Hurts. If you give me Brock Purdy, I'm all over it. Yeah, get the football out. Yeah, I'm going to utilize it. So it's to me, that's Kellen Moore's job. That's the difficulty of his job. Yeah. You gotta look at the player you have and try to build to the strengths of that particular player. I agree. There's probably a better middle ground, but I don't want to go completely to, the Kyle Shanahan offense where, he's turning his back to the line of scrimmage and play action, or, when you do take shots down the field, he's under center. I don't think that's going to work with Jalen. I don't think he's going to be happy as well. And that's half the battle, like you said, Dama. If he doesn't accept this and they're trying to get the football out quickly and Brock Purdy him, I don't think it's going to work.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious. I mentioned this, I think, last week. Last year that they played two back, that 20 personnel, either with one tight end or two tight ends, like 5, 6, less than 10 times the entire season. It was just a gimmick play for Nick. With Saquon, and I think this year they're going to use it a lot more and use these. They may have them both out in the field, and then one of them ends up lining up in the slot or outside as a wide receiver and running wide receiver patterns. I think they're going to be a little bit more diversified this year, and I think they'll get more in the passing game from those running backs, whether and I don't think it necessarily is going to be on dump offs. I think they'll find ways to get these guys down the field.
Yeah, it definitely was. They definitely used it more in minicamp and OTAs and the short time we're in there. But they've done that in the past as well. When Doug was here, I was joke about 21 pony with Darren Sproles and Donnell Pumphrey on the field at the same time. And the minute the pads came on, they ditched that. They did use Saquon and Kenny Gainwell together a couple times. And when it was ironically, it was Saquon as the decoy, and they were getting the ball to Kenny. So maybe they'll use it a little bit more because they have guys who in theory are good pass catchers, even Will Shipley, who kind of started slow but finished strong. So that's the type of back they want. That's the type of back they like. And so maybe they do use it a little bit more, but I got to tell you, Tomo, I'd rather just have a good third receiver. Boom. That's it. I'll work off AJ and Devontae. I don't know if I don't think it's going to be Paris Campbell. I think he's going to be the third receiver, but I don't think that's going to be great. If John Ross, if you hit the dart there, or one of these young guys develops, they've had a difficult time developing young receivers, with the exception of Devontae Smith, who was like a finished product when he got here.
Hunter Renfrow is still out there, right?
Yeah, he is. I don't know. I think he's too limited to the slot. I think they prefer to have somebody who can do some other things. I don't know, but that's my take on that. But boy, if they ever did find that third receiver who was accepting of the role, because you're not going to get a lot of traffic, but just make the plays when they come to you, I think this whole offense would sort of blossom if they get that third receiver.
Yeah. There's different ways to accomplish that. Goddard can become your third receiver.
Yeah.
He's a 50.
But I'm counting him as, part of it as well.
Yeah.
The issue is when Nick says, well, maybe it's Grant Calcaterra, maybe it's Saquon. I don't want to hear that. It can be limited in certain situations, but I always say that's a day off for a defensive back in the NFL. If you're going to say, hey, go check Grant Calcaterra, that's a day off. That's a day off for those guys. Now, if you run the ball, if you take advantage of the formation that way, and they have an extra DB on the field, and you can run the ball, that can work. But those guys, they're not NFL corners are good, man. And they're going to have those kind of guys in their hip pocket at will.
But if you're an offense, you're always looking for the mismatch in the passing game. And, a second tight end that can catch the ball. A corner may be faster than him. And Calcaterra is pretty fast, but he's not as big. Corners aren't as big. So, you take advantage of that. Same thing when you put somebody like Barkley outside. They got to decide how they want to cover him, what package they want on the field when Barkley's a possible receiver. Do you cover him with a linebacker? You can't stay with him if he goes downfield and you're trying to cover him with a linebacker.
Unless you're Zach Bond.
Yeah. So you're forced to do things like that. So I think that's what Kellen Moore is looking at, mismatches.
No, I agree. You know, if you can get the linebacker, yeah, that's what you're looking for. But just from a volume perspective, I think that could work in individual things, but if you're doing it again and again and again, they're going to figure it out.
Yeah.
From a volume perspective, I think you need that third guy who can,
Yeah, that was
athletically do it.
That was pretty clear last year. I mean, teams finally they were blanketing Smith and AJ down the field, and all we saw was them and then blitzing, and the Eagles, they had no answer for it. So during that 7-game stretch down at the end, they were just clueless.
I'm struggling to see how much upside this could have for the Eagles, just from the perspective of you have AJ, you have Devontae, you have Dallas Goedert, you probably have Jalen Hurts as an option in terms of taking the ball. Like you're already down to your 5th, 6th option. I just don't see how much upside there is in adding more to the, you're at your 5th or 6th. That's why I'm with John on the whole Saquon thing. He's turned me full circle on Saquon in the passing game. Like you got 5 options before you even can think about that. Now I know it should be a part of your game, but I mean, from an upside perspective, I don't necessarily see it with this offense.
Yeah. I mean, you've got to keep defenses guessing. And I mean, Barkley's, I mean, everybody looks at him as one of the best running backs when he was healthy in football, as far as a running back, but I mean, this guy came out, he's an outstanding receiver, and so is Gainwell. I mean, Gainwell was a receiver in college, much of his time. I mean, you use what you got.
That was DeAndre. So DeAndre's a hell of a receiver. I mean, you wouldn't know it.
One of their problems last year, you look at each game, very seldom did they throw the ball to more. They had maybe a few games where more than 4 or 5 guys caught passes. That can't be. I mean, we always heard coaches you talked about Andy and Doug. You got to throw the ball around. You take what they give you. I know that doesn't sound very exciting, but I mean, that's what you want at the end of a game. You want 8 guys who caught passes. You want defenses not knowing where you're going with the ball. Last year by the end, defenses knew where Jalen was going with the ball, Smith or to AJ.
Yeah, that to me is a bigger issue. And I don't know who to blame for that, Damo. Is it the quarterback? Was it Brian Johnson? Was it Nick Sirianni? If it's the quarterback, it's a problem. Because I think, with Kellen Moore in the new offense, do we want to put more on Jalen's plate, or was that the problem? And do you want to scale it back and put less on his plate?
Yeah.
I think that's a big question.
Well, unfortunately, and like I said, I think Jalen's going to be better this year, but last year I thought the problem was him. I mean, we saw in either the playoff game or the last game of the season, he's forcing balls down the field to AJ when he's got people. I think one time Gainwell was wide open underneath. Another time Goddard was wide open underneath. And he either didn't see them or ignored them because he was so obsessed with the deep ball to AJ. You can't do that. I mean, AJ Brown is one of the NFL's great receivers. He's probably one of the league's best ever 50-50 ball guys. But still, a guy's open, you throw him the ball and you get the first down and keep the chains moving. So I think that may be the biggest problem. The change for Jalen is getting adjusted to that change in the whole processing of how you approach the game.
How much of that falls on Jalen Hurts' shoulders, Damo? Just from a processing perspective, right? I mean, it's easy to hold the ball and wait till you can air it out to AJ Brown. He's the number 1 target, obviously. How much of that falls on Jalen Hurts' shoulders?
Yeah, well, I mean, I thought that was the lazy way to play quarterback last year. I mean, anybody can do that. It's like you're playing street ball. Okay, you go deep and I'll throw it to you. I mean, he wasn't looking at the whole field towards the end of the season. I mean, Jalen, you look at Jalen's season and the offense as a whole. They played 11 games. They were fine. They were averaging just slightly less points per game than the year before when they went to the Super Bowl, and then it all fell apart. I mean, Jalen's passer rating in the last 6 regular season games and the loss to Tampa Bay was like 81.1. You know, he was averaging 6 point something yards per attempt in those 7 games. And that's when teams just, that's when his approach changed, I think, too much. That's when teams started blitzing him and they seemed to have no clue how to deal with it. And I don't blame all of that on him as far as dealing with the blitz last year. They seemed to have, there was no, they didn't seem to have hot receivers. They didn't seem seem to have any way for him to go, a place for him to go when somebody was in his face. So I think that's going to change this year. Both his decision making, which I'm sure they've been harping on, and maybe he's been resisting, but
I find it very hard to believe, Damo, that any NFL coaching staff doesn't have hot routes built into the offense. I find, high school coaches have that. Nick's been coaching this game for a very long time. He won 29 of 32 games. I find it very hard to believe he doesn't have a hot route built into his offense. But we know that's a quarterback and receiver seeing what's going on the field, making the check to that hot route. I kind of blame that on the quarterback.
Yeah.
I know people don't want that. They want to blame it on the coach, and they want to blame it on the guy who's not here, who ultimately had to pay for it. Brian Johnson played quarterback. I find it very hard to believe, at a high level, by the way, at Utah, I find it very hard to believe he doesn't know what a hot route is.
Yeah.
Is that just me?
No. I mean, I'd go 60-40. I think 60% of it maybe was the quarterback. But I mean, if you're the coaches, I mean, when you see that happen in one game, you make sure it doesn't happen again. And it went on for 7 games last year. And it never got corrected. So I don't know. I gotta put, that's why I put some of the blame on the coaches. But yeah, I mean, Jalen, there's a lot of blame on the quarterback last year for what happened down the stretch.
To me, I think this is one of the spots that I think Kellen Moore can really help Jalen. Not in terms of reading the field, but give him some options, right? Like give him some routes. Give him Devontae or Dallas Goedert low and cutting across the middle of the field. I feel like Jalen was constantly looking for that deep ball, and it became a habit because there wasn't a whole lot out there. Now I do know there was a lot of all 22 footage that people broke down where he was missing receivers and stuff. So I think he'll get better at that, and that's a process. But just real quick on this topic, how concerned are you about the loss of Kelsey, specifically about something like this, right? I mean, he helped a lot with blitz pickup and those things, and that's all filtered into the hot routes and stuff like that, where the quarterback has to audible them or make the calls at the line of scrimmage based on what he sees, or in this case, what Kelsey saw. That's going to be gone now.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge to be determined. We don't know how good Cam Jurgens is going to be at that. Hell, we don't know how good Cam Jurgens is going to be at center in the tush push, which was a key thing for them last year. So, I mean, when you look at the things to watch this year, I mean, the center position is huge, and by virtue of him moving over, also right guard. So it's we'll find out early. We'll see in those first couple games. They seem to have a lot of confidence in Jurgens, so we'll see how he is as far as setting protections and things like that. Some of that may fall on Jalen. I mean, a lot of quarterbacks handle a lot of that themselves. I don't think when he's learning a new offense, you really want him to be overly concerned with that. You'd rather Jurgens handle it, but we'll see.
Yeah. At P Damo, make sure you follow Damo on X, Twitter. Does a tremendous job, obviously, covering this team. Nobody knows the history of the Philadelphia Eagles better than Paul Domowitch. And I want to go back to 2017 to end it, Damo, because, if you think about all the injuries the Eagles suffered and how they overcame it to win still the only Super Bowl in franchise history. One of the more underrated injuries was Chris Maragos, in that, team captain, special teams player. And he ended up losing his career with that injury. And I don't know if you saw yesterday, very underreported, but I was writing about it for SI. But Rothman has cut their contract with the Philadelphia Eagles to be their team positions because of the enormous judgment against them from the Chris Maragos injury. Chris sued the team, sued James Bradley, who performed the surgery. He's a University of Pittsburgh guy, very famous out there. Rothman was the Eagles team positions. They got hit for over $14 million, which is now up to $15 million. So they said, you know what, we're done. Since 2004, I believe Rothman has been the team positions of the Philadelphia Eagles. They no longer will be. On a scale of 1 to 10, how meaningful is this, Damo? I think it's more meaningful than people realize.
I have great respect for Rothman. They replaced my left hip twice. So
there you go.
Replaced my wife's knee twice.
I mean, they're obviously terrific doctors over there, terrific orthopedists. You know, I don't know who they're being replaced by. Hopefully,
nobody yet. Nobody knows. That's part of the problem.
Doctors out there, but I mean, this team, there's been some situations with NFL teams that have had the wrong orthopedic people, and things have gone sour. So they better get this right. Losing Rothman, I'd put it at a 4 maybe.
Yeah, I think it's a bigger deal. Now, Arsenault is the chief medical officer, and he's a Penn guy, I believe. So they had shipped. I think they knew this was coming.
Yeah,
but in 2004, if you go to the Novacare complex, right next door is Rothman.
Yeah,
they were in bed for a very long time. Now, obviously, both sides are on the same page as far as there's not going to be a gap in athletic care as they figure things out. But this is one of those things, Damo, that it's like a pain in the ass. You got to figure it out. And the season's coming up. It's like there's so many things that can go wrong for an NFL team. I think something just went wrong for an NFL team. And from that standpoint, I think it's an issue.
Is there any link between that and losing their medical guy, their Tim Rath?
Ted Rath. No, he's more of an NFL. He's more of the training side. Like Arse is still there. He's the head of the entire thing, and he's still going to be there. But and I think a lot of people don't realize, when you say team doctor, these are contracts where it gives Rothman a lot of good publicity.
Sure. Yeah.
So I think it from that standpoint, I think people don't realize. And I think, for them to tap out tells you how enormous that judgment was, but and good for Chris, by the way. I'm not, I know Nick Bowles that was a big deal when that case was going on. Nick Bowles, I think Jordan Hicks testified on his behalf. So you always hear that term successful surgery, Damo. It ain't always successful.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. But yeah, I wanted to throw that out there because it's just one of those things. It's like, man, it's another thing you got to deal with.
Yeah.
And I never think that's a positive.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
Damo, thanks for joining the show, man. We appreciate you being here. Make sure you guys follow Damo on Twitter at PDamo. One of the best in the business, Hall of Fame selector for a long time. Damo, thanks, man.
Thanks for having me, guys. Have a good weekend.
Thanks, Damo.
There's Paul Domowitz joining us on Birds 365. We'll take a quick commercial break. We'll come back. We got another 20 minutes to play until Ed Kratz, Johnny Mac's running mate at SI.com, will join us. Stay tuned, everybody, on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Is the best vacation one that you find or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Win and save this baseball season from Colony Pools and Power Washing, a local company serving Delaware, Delco, and Chester County since 1970. Are you tired of looking at your green house? Is your roof, siding, deck stained green from algae and mold? Let the experts pressure wash your home and take the pressure off of you. Win with Colony Pools and Power Washing. Call them now at 302-762-2250. That's 302-762-2250.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction. Go with trust.
Go Birds!
And go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to Friday's edition of Birds 365. And a welcome and thank everybody for being here this morning. Pretty good crowd on this football Friday. Just 77 days, everybody, until the Philadelphia Eagles kick off in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Now 76 days until the NFL kicks off on that Thursday night game, and just about 31 or 32 days until the Eagles report to training camp. They will report July 23rd. First practice will be July 24th. So coming right up, right around the corner. So pretty good stuff. Off season's moving right along. Summer's moving right along. But as Johnny Mac said, try and enjoy your summer. It will be done before we know it. So let's move on. Johnny Mac, I want to continue the conversation about the teams just and get these last two in before we get Ed Kratz up. Bengals and Jags. Weeks, I guess 5 would be the bye weeks. So 6, 7, 8 weeks, 8 and 9 of the year. I tell you what, this beginning of the season is a little bit tougher than I was thinking. Bengals and Jags are two good teams. I mean, Jags just signed their quarterback, obviously, to a record deal. The Bengals have Joe Burrow. They have Jamar Chase. They have a lot of good players there. Let's start with Cincinnati Bengals. How do you see them coming into the year?
Well, I'm a big Joe Burrow guy. We're going to have to see. I mean, I'm starting to get a little bit concerned about some of the injuries and piling up and some of the wear and tear. But if he's healthy and he's going, I mean, if you ask me, like, who was better 2 through 53, Cleveland or Cincinnati? I'd say Cleveland by a pretty significant advantage. But I think Cincinnati's closer to being a Super Bowl contender because of Joe Burrow. And if he's playing at that level, he's playing at an all-pro level, he's healthy, he's out there, which is a big if. They're going to be difficult to deal with. So, most important position in sports, and they got a really good one. And they're a completely different team when he's out there. So kind of wait and see situation. As I said, I don't think they have quite as much talent as Cleveland. That's a very good division as a whole. And unfortunately, the Eagles have to play it this year. So if I were rating the talent, it would be Cleveland, Baltimore, probably jockeying for the most in that division, then Cincinnati, then Pittsburgh. But they're all good. And
Yeah, they all can be sneaky. They all have that ability to be a sneaky, tough team to play because they got good players all throughout.
Well, I don't think many are sneaky. Certainly, Baltimore and Cincinnati aren't sneaky at this stage because Baltimore's been in the conversation of being obviously they have to get over the hump in the playoffs, but as a regular season team, they were off the charts last year. Cincinnati's made a Super Bowl run with Joe Burrow already. So I think people know how good they are. But you got to keep him healthy and he's got to be out there for the entire season. And that part of it's a bigger app. Jake Browning, though, proved he was a really good backup quarterback. Not that you want him out there, but that's something that you can at least lean on if you're Zach Taylor, to have a pretty good backup quarterback.
You think the Bengals made a mistake drafting Jamar Chase over Penei Sewell?
No, I mean, I have a tough time criticizing. He's a superstar, Jamar Chase.
I mean, he's a top tier. I just wonder if they didn't value enough building from the inside out, similar to how the Eagles did.
Yeah, I mean, I hear it. Typically, I agree with the Eagles' philosophy, which is built on the lines, and I'm not criticizing Penei Sewell, but anytime, and I would say the same thing from Detroit's perspective. Anytime you get a player like that, I'm not going to criticize it. And the same thing with Chase. Anytime you get a player like that, it's hard to criticize it. So, he's in the conversation for being the best receiver in football, right there with Justin Jefferson. Ironically, they were teammates in college. He's very good, very good. So I can't criticize him for that. I mean, part of their, to have those skill position players they have, and they've, worked things out for T. Higgins, at least for this year. So that helps, and that certainly helps Joe Burrow as well. But is it the chicken or the egg?
Yeah,
is
I mean,
Chase making Burrow better? Yeah.
I mean, I get you need guys for him to throw the ball to, but he does take a lot of hits for being as good as he is. And when you're a team and you're
well, part of it, he wants to take those hits. He's one of those guys that wants to stay in there to give the receiver that extra split second to be. So part of it is on him.
Yeah, that's true.
But now they've gotten a little bit better. It was kind of amazing. They when they made their Super Bowl run, they're a lot better now on the offensive line than they were then. Not that they're great, but yeah, that's an issue. But part of that is the quarterback. He's got to maybe understand for his own safety. He's got to get the ball out at times and live to play another down, so to speak. So yeah, that's been an issue. And that's why I say Cleveland has got more talent from 2 through 53. There's a perfect example. I mean, their offensive line in Cleveland is much better than Cincinnati's offensive line.
Yes, it'll be interesting to see how they are this year. I think Joe Burrow is as good as they come at the quarterback position, but we will see if he's able to stay healthy and if they're able to piece it all together and make another run this year. Johnny Mac, last team I want to talk about before we get to Ed Kratz. So we'll have done the first 8 games of our first 8 teams that we will play in the season. The Jacksonville Jaguars, Doug Pederson's Jacksonville Jaguars. Doug Pederson, my favorite Eagles coach of all time, obviously had lifted the trophy for the Philadelphia Eagles. What do you make of the
Doug's
Jags?
On the hot seat, man. Doug's got to get it done this year.
What does get it done mean, though? I mean,
he's got to make the playoffs at least. I'm not going to say.
Well, they made the playoffs last year.
They were disappointing. And Trevor Lawrence has got to play better, especially now that they've given him $55 million. It went the same contract essentially as Joe Burrow. And they're tops of the list. Like, no offense, but Trevor Lawrence doesn't belong there at this stage. But it's about timing. We always talk about contracts. He has not performed at that level. And I think a lot of people, including myself, so I'm not criticizing, thought that Trevor Lawrence would be a
I definitely
superstar by now. And he's good, but he hasn't taken that next step. And I think that's got to happen this year. Or there could be issues, and obviously Doug is an offensive coach, a quarterback himself, is going to get blamed for that, especially now that the contract is in the conversation as well.
You would think
Because now the expectations
are
are only going to go up.
Yeah.
But
you would think he would have needed to do that before he got the massive contract and take that next step, but he didn't.
Yeah. But they lost. I'm trying to look it up. They were going to make the playoffs. They didn't make the playoffs. They were 8-3. So take out the Eagles, and they had the biggest collapse of anybody besides the Eagles. They were 8-3 on November 26th, and then they lost 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of 6 to end the season. And a disappointing loss to Tennessee in the final game. The only team they beat over that span, Carolina, the worst team in football. So they lost to Cincinnati, Cleveland, Baltimore. Again, the AFC North, that's very difficult. They lost to Tampa, they beat Carolina, and they lost to Tennessee. And they missed the playoffs after starting 8-3. So, Doug's Doug's got to get it. Doug's got to get it done this year, or especially with that contract adding to the mix. And it's going to be difficult in that conference, because that to me is a deeper conference. If you look at potential playoff teams, the AFC East, you got Buffalo, Miami, the Jets. Jets are probably going to be good if Aaron Rodgers stays healthy, but he's 40 years. Who knows with that? But if he is, they're going to be good. Talked about the AFC North. Yeah, Houston all of a sudden is back in the conversation as one of the better teams because of the quick development of C.J. Stroud. Indianapolis is going to have Richardson back. Shane Steichen had him on the cusp of the playoffs last year. The West is pretty weak outside of Kansas City, but it's going to be difficult for Jacksonville.
Yeah, I was thinking of that big playoff game, but that was not last year. That was 2 years ago when they had that massive comeback. Trevor Lawrence threw like 4 interceptions or whatever it was, and then they came back on the Chargers. But that's right. That wasn't even last year. That was the wild card of 2022, and then they got knocked out by the Chiefs. Only lost that game 27-20. But yeah, it looks like Doug's got to get that thing going. I mean, I just struggle because I'm like, they're the Jaguars. Like, I think Doug's already done a pretty good job, but you are right.
Well, that's part of it. But you know
Yeah.
how quickly expectations change, and especially
Yeah.
when you're paying the quarterback $55 million.
Yeah.
Expectations change, and yeah, I'm with you. I'm a big Doug Pederson guy. People know that. I like Doug a lot. But I'm just telling you, he's on, and I like Tony Khan a lot. And he might be my favorite owner in the NFL because he's a wrestling guy. But I mean, it's just the way of the world in the NFL. If you don't reach expectations, we take it all the time with Jeffrey Lurie. Talk about it all the time. If you don't reach expectations, it's, you're hired to be fired.
Yep, that's the name of the game. Isn't he kind of getting some flack down there too for the whole Press Taylor thing? I mean, he still is offensive.
No, he gets more. I think he gets more heat here for the whole Press Taylor thing than down there.
But
I don't think
down there are had.
Well, I'm sure they are
that.
because again, they're coming off that giant collapse, and Trevor's not playing well, and he's the offensive coordinator. So I'm sure there is, probably not Philadelphia levels, but yeah, I mean, Yeah, he's on there. Everybody's on the hot seat in Jacksonville, and Press among them. So I would say that. But yeah, Press is not an idiot, despite what the Eagles said out the door. And he had him at 8-3. We kind of talked about with Damo. I still can't explain the Eagles' collapse. The Eagles can't explain it. If you could explain it, they'd fix it. Sure, the same thing is going on in Jacksonville.
Yeah, they were a streaky team. I tell you what, they had a couple really good wins in last year. They beat Buffalo. I mean, they beat Houston after losing to them early in the year. But their first two losses when they started 6-2 was Kansas City and Houston. I mean, they were playing good football, and then they just went on a crazy bad slide where they lost in overtime to the Bengals, and then it was downhill from there. And as you mentioned, the only team they beat was the Panthers. They beat them 26-0, but that was the only team they beat for the rest of the year. So we'll see what Jacksonville's able to do this year. I think they're going to be a pretty good team, but the AFC is loaded, and they're not. I don't think they're a top roster in that AFC. What do you think of Trent Baalke, John?
Yeah, Trent's a controversial figure.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's had some personal issues. I think he's a good football guy. He understands talent. But that only goes so far. I know, he kind of reminds me of Ryan Grigson, who was here, and Ryan's like an old school football guy, but I think he's a little bit too old school, and the game is changing so dramatically. I think maybe he's a little bit behind the curve now. And we all I tend to pride myself as an older guy for being open-minded. Because I don't like a lot of the things about the modern NFL, but I acknowledge their existence. And I'm not going to bang my head against the wall and say, I'm going to run the football first. I say it all the time. I make fun of people. It's stupid in this era to do that or think you can do that on a consistent basis and be relevant. And by relevant, I mean a true Super Bowl contender. I don't necessarily like it, but it's the way of the world. And if you're not, because of all the rule changes, because of how the sport has been skewed, the safety things, you can talk about being physical. Ryan, for those who remember him from his time in Philadelphia, he was the Eagles' director of player personnel, I guess. But for those who knew him or met him around, he's huge. He's 6'6"-ish, all 300 pounds, was an offensive lineman in his playing days. Just a massive guy. And he likes, what do offensive linemen like to do? They like to run the football. I think he's a little bit too old school, and he's stuck in that mentality. I get that kind of feeling with Trent a little bit as well.
Makes sense. Let's get to our next commercial break. We have Ed Kratz in the green room, so we'll talk to Ed Kratz, Johnny Mac's running mate over at SI.com. So we'll talk to Ed Kratz coming up next on Birds 365. Stay tuned, everybody.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Is the best vacation one that you find or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Win and save this baseball season from Colony Pools and Power Washing, a local company serving Delaware, Delco, and Chester County since 1970. Are you tired of looking at your green house? Is your roof, siding, deck stained green from algae and mold? Let the experts pressure wash your home and take the pressure off of you. Win with Colony Pools and Power Washing. Call them now at 302-762-2250. That's 302-762-2250.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction. Go with trust.
Go Birds!
And go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to a Friday edition of Birds 365. Joined now by Ed Krause. Ed, welcome to the show, man. How you doing on this Friday?
Happy summer, guys. Happy summer to you.
Happy summer. Stay cool, Ed. It's hot out there.
Yeah, it sure is.
It's gonna be hot it has been hot, but it's gonna be a heat wave. It's gonna be upper 90s next couple of days locally. A lot of people are not local listening to us, but
yeah.
And for them,
good training camp weather. Too bad training camp.
Not good training camp. Get it out of the way. I love that. Get those hot days out of the way. I need nice low 80 degree days, no humidity for training camp. If the gods of weather are taking any orders, that's when I'm going to order for Eagles training camp. Let's talk about Eagles training camp. I thought you had an interesting piece over at si.com/NFL/Eagles. The most important offseason hire for Ed Krause on the coaching staff was who?
Clint Hurt, the very wide, and I'm leaving out an adjective there, as Jordan Davis.
F.
Yes. And he is all that. But anyway, yeah, Clint Hurt, defensive line coach, to me is the most important hire. I know Christian Parker, his job is to make sure this pass defense isn't torched like it was last year with, the next to last most yards allowed during the year, lots of touchdown passes. But Clint Hurt, to me, he's got a young group. Nobody over the age of 25. Milton Williams and Marlon Tuipulatu are the two oldest members of that D line, and they're both 25 years old. Both came in the same draft of 2021, so this means this is their last year of their contract. And then, of course, Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis, two back-to-back first-round picks that he's going to be tasked with getting them to reach their potential. And to me, that makes him the most important hire on that staff. Christian Parker has a lot of bodies to work with, a lot of good, talented cornerbacks. So, to me, it was between him and Clint Hurt. I know Bobby King is another newcomer at the linebacker spot, doesn't quite have the talent, only has a couple guys he needs to sort through. But to me, it's maximizing the potential for Davis and Carter. And, Clint Hurt, I think, can do it. But that's why he's my most important hire of the offseason. And that, of course, John and Zander is excluding the coordinators. Obviously they're pretty important too. But, as far as assistant coaches go, Clint Hurt gets my vote for the most important hire.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. The one other guy I think I would add personally would be Doug Nussmeier, just because I think the quarterback position is obviously such an important position. But going back to Clint Hurt, going back to the D line, how are you think we're underestimating media, the fans, everybody, the loss of Fletcher Cox? I mean, look, I'm high on Jalen Carter. I think the guy's going to be great, but Fletcher Cox is a big loss. He's been playing at a high level on this football team for a long time at a premium position. Now you're losing him. You're losing 700 snaps a year, whatever he played last year, right around that number. How big of a loss is that for the Eagles?
Well, it's huge, and Fletcher is really unlike Jason Kelce. Fletcher has stayed in the shadows. He doesn't come out and, doesn't have a podcast, so he's not saying things that keeps him in the 24-hour news cycle like Jason Kelce is. But, we talked to Brandon Graham during minicamp, and, he said he had just hung up the phone with Fletcher Cox before he took the podium to speak with us. So, Fletcher's in the shadows, but I think he's still going to be very involved with what goes on, with these young players and their development. He's a phone call away. How often he'll be there? He said he'd probably stop by. I got together with him when I judged in an Italian
he's judging hoagie contest. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, down in the Philly market, which was a blast back in May. So I got a chance to talk with Fletcher for a little bit, and he said he's going to be stopping in, but he's also probably going to be taking a vacation when training camp starts, at least at some point during training camp, because to get his mind away from playing football, he said he's probably going to go away for a while. But he's just a phone call away. But Zander, it's a huge loss to me, maybe even more so than Kelce, because of what Kelce left behind. You still have a star left tackle in Malati. You still have an experienced right tackle in Lane Johnson. Landon Dickerson is extremely talented left guard. You have a couple holes, and that's okay. I think they have the personnel to adjust to that. But that defensive line without Fletcher Cox, like I said, is so young and so inexperienced. There's no veteran, which is concerning. I don't know if the Eagles did themselves any favors, to be honest, by not bringing in a veteran at that spot. I thought that they would benefit from that, but they're apparently comfortable turning this thing over to Jalen Carter, 9th overall pick in the draft. But he can't play every single snap of every single game. You're going to need some depth there behind him and Davis. And then you have Milton Williams, Moro Ojoma. They're counting heavily on him, I think. Round pick from last year. So, these are young guys that they need to develop and mold, and Clint Hurt is going to be responsible for doing that. But yeah, losing Fletcher Cox is huge, from on the field, off the field, all of the above. It's a loss that maybe we are overlooking just a bit.
Yeah, and I don't know if you saw the Nolan Smith was at some golf thing down in Georgia, I think, and he was talking about the Christmas gift he gave Fletcher, because Fletcher has a giant ranch in Texas. He's a rancher,
right?
As Fletcher likes to say. And so Nolan bought him a flamethrower for Christmas that he loves. So that was interesting. Speaking of guys who got to step up, Nolan Smith, year two, we'll keep it on that defensive front. Typically, and you just talked about some of the depth issues and some of the unproven guys having to step up, whether it's Marlon or Morrow at defensive tackle. Same thing at edge, man. I mean, we focus on Bryce Hupp because Bryce Hupp has got to be the guy.
Yeah.
But even without it, even if Bryce Hupp is the guy and turns out to be what the Eagles think he's going to be, they still need snaps from Nolan Smith and maybe somebody else, because you don't know how much you're going to get from Brandon Graham. We saw Josh Sweat. You probably want to limit his snaps after seeing what happened to him late last season with a career high. It's a little bit strange for Howie to, I don't want to say ignore, but not give that. Howie's always about the offensive and defensive fronts. Mm-hmm. And it looks a little bit less strong than it typically is this time of year.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, good edge rushers are awfully hard to find in this league, and that's why they tend to go quickly in drafts and free agency. They're not out there very long, and they do seem to be a little bit, needing depth on the outside there. There's always a guy that I liked who's kind of been up and down, Patrick Johnson. I think he can play a little bit. I think we've seen him play well at times, but he kind of gets lost in the shuffle for whatever reason. Maybe he's just not consistent enough, but this is, I think, his, fourth year now in the league. I think he came in 2021 also. He might be
contract year for Patrick Johnson.
Yeah. For Milton Williams and Marlon Tuipulotu and a lot of these guys. So, and then you throw in a guy like Taron Jackson, who has kind of been, as a rookie, he came in and played some snaps, and, last year he was on the practice squad. Can he factor in to perhaps giving them something off the edge? But this is what we're reduced to. We're reduced to a lot of unknowns on that outside. And like you said, John, Nolan Smith is, he's got to come out. And I thought it was interesting. He said that he has the same hopes and dreams that everyone has for him, which is a 10-plus sack year, tackles, setting the edge, all that stuff. So he knows what's expected of him. He wants to get to that level, but can he? And, he's going to be a big part of whether this defense sinks or swims.
Yeah.
Let's keep it on defense there, Ed. I mean, earlier this week, ESPN, I think it was Mike Clay, put out a ranking of the Eagles linebackers, or the NFL, the linebackers all throughout the NFL. Eagles group was ranked 30th of 32nd. I'm not going to beat the dead horse. We know that the Eagles linebackers aren't good here. But can they overcome that as a defense, right? Everybody is expecting the defense to take a big step forward. I think the team is counting on the defense to take that step forward if they want to reach the expectations or reach the goals that they have for the year. Can they do that with this linebacker core the way it is right now?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say they're not good. I mean, we just don't know. And that's every component of this defense. We just don't know. Every level, we don't know. And, can Devin White be the Devin White that he was early in his career in Tampa? Can he rush the passer? He talked about that. He wants to be able to rush the passer. He's got 23 career sacks. I could see possibly, I know Fangio doesn't like to blitz, but maybe he lines up kind of, on the line a little bit. Maybe they bring him off of the edge and they don't play him at linebacker, and they put Nakobe and Zach Bond at linebacker when they do that with Devin White. Maybe he's the guy that's going to come in off of the edge. He's certainly got the build for it. He's a big dude. So we'll see. I mean, I think what we do know about this defense is the flexibility I think it's going to give Fangio. There's a lot of guys, and we've talked about this before. John likes to talk about the positionless NFL, and we see that, I think, on this defense. You have a lot of pieces that you can use in very versatile roles, and Devin White might be that guy. But I like Zach Bond. I like to see what he can do. I don't know why he didn't have a role with the Saints, but we'll see what he can do here in Philadelphia, because I think he's going to be given an opportunity. He was very good at Wisconsin. Played with was it one of the Watts, I think, or Andrew Van Ginkel. He played with Andrew Van Ginkel. Yeah. But I'm excited to see what he has.
All the Eagles talk about is Andrew Van. Why didn't they sign Andrew Van Ginkel?
No, right?
I know. I would have liked to have old Rip here, Van Ginkel. Yeah. But you know what? He named his kid Rip, by the way. I don't know if you knew that. He's got a son that he named Rip. That might be a nickname. It might be like Andrew Van Ginkel II. But anyway, he's in Minnesota. Nothing we can do about that now. But and the Kobe Dean, another unknown at that linebacker spot that we just don't know. Can he stay healthy? And when he was healthy, he didn't really set the world on fire. So, it's an unknown group, but you can say that just about anywhere on this defense, except maybe cornerback, where they seem to be pretty well stocked.
One guy nobody talks about, Ed. Nobody. And we just went through it. We didn't talk about it, but I'm going to bring him up. Jalix Hunt. I think everybody just assumes, well, he's a developmental guy. We're going to stick him over in the corner. Maybe he's a prodigy. Maybe he shows up and says, I mean, he looks like an edge rusher. You look at the guy and you go, wow, that's pretty impressive. Maybe he is a developmental guy, and they're just going to redshirt him, and we'll revisit the subject in 2025. But what if Jalix Hunt just shows up and he's so good, he gets on the field?
We've seen guys come in that have looked like they could do the job. Like Janarius Robinson from the Vikings.
Janarius should.
He was a big dude. And maybe I think he's with the Raiders now, and maybe he kind of clicks in Vegas. I don't know. But he certainly looked the part. And you're right, Jalen Hunt, you do forget about him. I forgot about him. He's a 3rd-round pick, but you're right. Maybe he comes in and it's like, hey, let's take that developmental hat off of him. And let's throw him out there for a few snaps and see what he does. These rookies sometimes tend to play a little fast because they want to try to do everything all at once and be everywhere all at once. So, you have to be careful using him too much, obviously, because that seems to be the kind of guy he is to me, is he's going to try to do everything fast, like we saw with Sidney Brown. Sometimes, in his rookie year, he was out of position because he plays so fast and wants to be everywhere all at once. So, if they can get him to calm down and understand his role, maybe they can grow it as the season goes along, and maybe he will be a factor. Like to see it because he seems like a really fun guy to talk to and cover, and I think he'd be highly entertaining. I think the fan base would love this kid. So maybe he kind of can fit in there and grow that role.
Ed, let's go over to offense. Are we having June blues about the wide receiver 3 position, or does it really not matter for this team? I think there's.
I mean, look, they brought in, Zach Pascal 2 years ago. He had, 20 catches, maybe 30. I don't know. Quez Watkins. Yeah, I mean, Quez Watkins was the 3rd guy. Didn't throw to him much. Olamide Zaccheaus last year.
Julio.
Julio, right? Yeah. Julio Jones, down by the schoolyard, Julio. He they don't really need that extra weapon. You have Goddard, the 2 receivers. You have Saquon now. You have maybe CJ Uzama as the backup tight end. I mean, how many weapons do you really need? I mean, I think you'd like to have somebody to stretch the field. Sirianni talked about it a lot. That's why Quez was on the team, because of his blinding speed, being able to stretch the defense.
Jody loved that. Jody would love that when I would bring that up.
Well, my point is I don't think it matters. I mean, maybe John Ross. John Ross has that blinding speed, and and Paris Campbell can run it too. And I like both those guys. They, we talked to them a little bit this spring. They, they're both likable guys, easy to root for. So maybe, those are the guys, and that's okay, because they're not going to throw them the ball that much. Now, if you have an injury to Brown or Smith, then it really matters. We saw that last year when Brown got hurt early in the Giants game. Their offense didn't do very well. And then we saw it in Tampa. Their offense didn't do anything, and AJ wasn't on the field. So if you lose one of those guys for any stretch, then yes, it's going to matter greatly. But right now, heading into training camp, everybody's healthy. It doesn't matter. But things change pretty quickly, and it could matter, before we know it.
Yeah. Sure.
The problem is, from a roster perspective, Ed, I think, they're going to keep 6 receivers, and it's one of their weakest positions from a depth perspective. Obviously, it's great at the top with AJ and Devontae, but the depth is not there. But from my perspective, we know how the NFL works. They're going to keep the rookies. They're going to keep Benaiah Smith, who I got a Shelton Gibson vibe in minicamp. He couldn't catch anything. Punts, catches, ball thrown to him. Hopefully he settles down. Johnny Wilson's going to make this team, but he's probably not going to be ready early on. Britton Covey's going to make this team because he's one of the best punt returners in football. And they won't give him an opportunity. By the way, I think they should give him a chance to be a slot receiver, but they won't. And then you're going to have Paris or John Ross as that last guy, but really the 3rd receiver. I don't know. I don't like that. It's one of their weakest positions, and they're going to keep a bunch of guys just because they feel they have to keep a bunch of guys.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see on those rookies. I mean, and it'll depend on what kind of tape they put out there in the summer, in the joint practice with the Patriots, and then, the 3 preseason games, which are kind of weird, playing the Vikings in the preseason. That's kind of a strange game that never really.
It's a strange game.
Yeah, that really never happens. But Yeah, so I think a lot of it's going to depend on that. I thought Johnny Wilson, he was okay in the 5 times we watched him practice. He dropped some passes, especially in individual drills where you have to make every single catch. Nobody's guarding you.
He was Chris Carter compared to Anias.
Anias did not.
Everything.
Yeah. I mean, listen, if these guys don't really shine much, and they'll be given every opportunity to play in the preseason, there's no doubt. So if they put together a pretty good preseason, then you probably have to keep them. But I wouldn't rule out, releasing these guys and trying to get them to the practice squad, to be honest. If, and again, there's a lot of variables here. If John Ross plays well, if Paris Campbell continues to, show he can make this team. So there's a long way to go. But I wouldn't quite rule out the fact that maybe the Eagles can move on from these 2 rookies, or at least one of them anyway, and try to get them to the practice squad. So, a lot of summer to go to figure all that out. But don't be surprised if one of those guys gets cut and they try to bring him back to the practice squad.
Ed, in your opinion, how does Saquon Barkley help this offense this year?
Well, defenses are going to have to be aware of what he is and where he's doing. They're going to have to include him in every game plan that defenses put together, I think. And that's a win right there. I mean, are you going to game plan for Kenny Gainwell to beat you? Probably not. Saquon, yeah, you got to make sure he doesn't beat you. And then you have to make sure AJ doesn't beat and Devontae. So he makes this, they talk about baseball and batting orders, how you can kind of make the batting order a little bit longer and, make it harder for pitchers to go through all 9 guys. It's the same way with football with this lineup. It's just now you have to game plan for an extra guy, another guy. So I think just from that aspect, he helps. Whether or not he's, the 1,400 yard rusher that we think he can be this year, he still is someone you have to account for if you're a defensive coordinator when you're putting together a game plan against the Eagles.
The aggregators will not shut up about Justin Simmons, Ed Kratch. And if it's not Justin Simmons, it's Eddie Jackson. If the Eagles are going to add a veteran player, a somewhat meaningful veteran player between now and training camp, do you think it'll be at safety? Do you think it'll be at defensive tackle? Do you think it'll be at wide receiver? What do you think? Howie doesn't, he talks about talent acquisition season all the time, and it exists right up till the trade deadline. He generally is going to add somebody at some point. Is he going to wait? Does he want to see guys in training camp? Is it going to be Steve Nelson showing up a day before training camp? Is he going to add somebody somewhere on this roster?
Steve Nelson. I mean, another cornerback? I mean, maybe. I mean, he added.
No, I meant Steve because he showed up like a day before training.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. But I think you hit the
point. They have 14 cornerbacks. Yeah. They're not going to.
I know. But he keeps bringing them in, right? He added that undrafted kid, Sean
Terry Nickerson, too. Sean Steve.
Yeah. I mean, my goodness. How many do you need? But I think you hit the priority right there, John. I think, safety, D tackle, or, edge, say D-line in general, and then receiver. I think those are the 3 positions, especially safety and D-line, where they probably could use some help. And maybe Justin Simmons will be that guy because they're kind of walking a tightrope, in my opinion, at safety they're so thin there. I mean, I think it was encouraging. The Eagles put out a video clip of their players, posing for different pictures and stuff. And Sidney Brown was part of that compilation.
Oh yeah. Sidney's ready to go, man. I've been telling people that I saw Sidney. He looks like he could play right now.
Right. He did the gritty in this video I'm talking about that the Eagles released. That's not easy to do. That's a little, that's a hardship on the ACL. So he seemed to pull that off okay. So maybe he'll be ready. But, the Eagles, they like to take things slow. We saw it with Nakobe this spring. They're not pushing him. They're probably going to take things slow with Sidney as well. But he's 22 years old. I mean, that knee surgery, he can bounce back from that, in a snap of a finger. But so maybe he's ready. But again, even if he is, there's still 3 safeties on this roster that are known guys. CJ Gardner-Johnson, Reed Blankenship, and Sidney Brown. And then you get to maybe Mekhi Gardner, Tristan McCollum, Andre Salmon, undrafted free agent.
And Avante, the 2-for-1 guy.
Yes, perhaps Avante. And Bradberry, who practiced all of 2 minutes this spring. Maybe he makes the transition to safety, like Nick had talked about during the spring, that maybe he'll play.
But here's the thing about Simmons, and here's what I think, and I want to throw it off you. I think the Eagles want Reed Blankenship to be a starting safety on this team. I think they like Reed Blankenship, and they believe in Reed Blankenship. And you talk about that video, who was front and center? Reed Blankenship, which tells you something. Yeah, they think he's a part of this team, and he's an impactful part of this team. You're not bringing in Justin Simmons to be a backup. So if Reed Blankenship is your starter and you believe in him, Justin Simmons didn't come in here.
That's right. Yeah, you're right. And so who is in that second tier? Eddie Jackson? Is he someone that you can bring in as a depth piece? Because CJ Gardner-Johnson is your other starting safety. Yeah. He's not playing in the slot. The Eagles have way too many options in the slot.
17 slot corners now.
Right. I mean, and I think the rookie's going to win that job. I think Cooper DeJean is going to start as a rookie in the slot. So yeah, that you're right. You're not going to bring in somebody to supplant Reed Blankenship, because let's be honest, the Eagles like to say, hey, look at us. We found this guy as an undrafted free agent out of Middle Tennessee State, kudos to us, so they want to run him out there. They want to showcase him. The guy did lead the Pro Bowl voting, for whatever that's worth, at one point during the season last year. But again, he's another guy that, he tends to get nicked up a little bit, had some rib issues last year. So you're going to need to bring in somebody off the bench, and maybe that's where Maddox comes in. So maybe they don't bring in a safety. Maybe they're happy with Maddox and the fact that he can do it. And as I think Christian Parker alluded to, safety is a very tough position in this defense, because you have to communicate everything. You have to be very talkative back there, and you have to understand every nuance of this defense. So to bring somebody in late at that spot, you're going to get a crash course in having to learn all that. So maybe they'll go defensive line. Maybe they're waiting for somebody to shake loose there, or linebacker. Maybe they bring in another linebacker to the mix. I'd like to see Sean Bradley come back and see what he can do in that mix. But there are ways for them to go to add a veteran, and Howie, it is acquisition season. He brought in the two linebackers last year in August, Miles Jack, who retired, and
came back.
And then he went back to the Steelers. Yeah. And then Zach Cunningham. So, he's going to bring in somebody, and it's going to be interesting to see the position that he brings that person in at.
See, to me, the clear winner for me, or the clear, if it were me and I were Howie Roseman, I would go defensive tackle. Yeah. It's simply, it honestly loops back to what we started this interview with, Ed. You talking about Clint Hurt and how important that man is because of the guys he's developing. I think in order to get the most out of Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis, you have to have some sort of rotation that when they're not on the field, it's not a complete Grand Canyon type of drop-off. And I just don't know if you're going to get that with Marlon Tuipulotu or Moro Ajomo. I think
PJ Mustipher.
I mean, I'd like to see a guy there.
I put 3 bubble players
and give them some depth so that the pressure is not on Carter all the time.
Ed, I put up 3 bubble players on SI yesterday who got a chance to make some noise for a roster spot. One of them was Mekhi Gardner, we just talked about because of the issues at force safety. One of them is Max Sharping, because that was a weird signing, late signing. And that tells you something. It's like, all right, Max has started 38 games in the NFL. So that tells me either you don't trust Matt Hennessy or he's not healthy. Trevor Keegan's not ready. Dylan McMahon's not ready. So you bring in Max Sharping. And then the third one was the guy I just mentioned, PJ Mustipher. He's a legitimate big guy, nose tackle type. And as Zander's saying, look, if you lose Jordan Davis, you can't play the way Vic wants to play with those 50 fronts, with those 5-man fronts, because then you're throwing Marlon Tuipulotu in there, weighs 300 pounds. He can do it, but he's not going to do it effectively. So if you got a big 325-pound guy like PJ Mustipher and he can play at all, you got a backup for Jordan Davis. Those are my 3 guys.
Yeah, they're
like them, indifferent.
I saw that. I liked him. How old is Sharping? Do you know that, Mighty Max?
27, I believe.
Okay, so he's young because I know they brought in Dennis Kelly last year, and everybody thought, wow, he's going to make this team, but he didn't have anything left.
Max
he was
is 27. Yeah.
Yeah. So Max. Yeah. So yeah, I like those 3 picks. Hard to dispute them. I mean, I would probably go 3 different directions, but
all right, let's hear them.
Well, I mean, I like Andre Sam. I think he's got a real shot, an undrafted kid. They didn't bring in many undrafted guys because they didn't have the roster room, 7 of them. Yeah. Gabe Hall, perhaps. I mean,
everybody loves Gabe. Yeah,
he's got good size. He plays defensive tackle. Maybe he's a guy that can play on that defensive line. Mustipher, we'll see. Does he have the quickness, to kind of, occupy 2 blockers? I don't know. But yeah, I would go maybe Sam and Andre Sam, Gabe Hall, 2 undrafted guys. They're probably going to keep 1 or 2 undrafted guys. They always do. And then that running back, another undrafted kid, Kendall Milton. Is that his name? The kid from Tennessee?
Kendall Milton from Georgia. Yeah.
Georgia.
Well, I've always wanted to see, we have seen it at times with Jordan Howard, even Jay Ajayi, if you want to go back even further, those one-cut running backs. The Eagles are always looking for these 3-down guys who wiggle, and I want to see somebody who just hits the freaking line.
Yeah.
And I think Kendall Milton could be that guy, but
yeah,
he might even going to keep 4 running backs. I don't know.
Yeah, that's the issue. And even if you don't want to keep him, there's another kid who just went out of my head.
Lou Nichols.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't the tight end, EJ Jenkins. I like EJ Jenkins.
Yeah, EJ looked good, and
I think he's a possible bubble guy at tight end because you have Calcaterra, who Nick praised as having a good spring.
Nick seems to love Grant Calcaterra. I've seen nothing from Grant Calcaterra. I like him, but I've seen nothing.
Yeah.
The Eagles seem to see more.
Well, yeah, they drafted him, so he's got a little bit of a leg up there. But yeah, you got CJ Uzomah, Dallas Goedert. Are they going to keep 4 tight ends? Probably not. But EJ Jenkins to me could be a bubble player, depending on if guys are banged up at some point during training camp and he steps up and shines. But he's probably more of a practice squad guy. But yeah, to get back to Zander's point, I think defensive tackle specifically makes a lot of sense. We'll see if Gabe Hall, once the pads come on, we're going to learn more about what they have up front. And maybe that's what Howie's waiting for is those first few padded practices before he says, hey, we need some help here. So you're going to be watching the Gabe Hall and the PJ Mustipher and the Andre Sam, those types of players to see when they put the pads on, can that translate into what they did?
Yeah, that's when, in the spring. That's when Reed Blankenship, the day the pads came on, they were like, ooh, look at Reed Blankenship. It still matters.
Yeah, absolutely matters. If you can't translate from your pajamas in spring to the pads in the summer, then, you're going to be toast and they're going to look to replace you. So that's probably what happens. If he's going to make an addition to this team, it's probably going to happen in August, I would guess, or late July, because training camp starts a little earlier this year, July 23rd, they begin to trickle in, and then July 24th, I assume, is going to be the first practice. They won't put pads on, obviously, right away.
No, you got the ramp up period. They're not allowed to. Yeah.
That's right. So, but by the end of July, early August, if they don't like what they see from some of these guys, Howie's going to be on the phone and trying to bring somebody in.
Yep, we'll see what they end up doing. Make sure you guys follow Ed Kratz on Twitter and X or whatever you want to call it at Kratz E. Read all his work at SI.com. Ed has some of the best pieces and some of the best overreactions you will ever find. They're making headlines all off season long. Ed, thanks for joining the show, man. We appreciate you being here today.
Just one question, Zander. Did you ever get to the bottom of that betting situation in Brazil that we discussed last week? Are you on that at all? Have you made any calls?
I have boots on the ground in Sao Paulo now. They are working on getting the intel back to me. And by Ed Kratz's next appearance, I'm told we will have more information on the betting.
All right, man.
I'm going to call it Sao Paulo, Brazil now. Sao Paulo, Brazil.
All right. Betting gate shall be solved soon. Ed, thanks for doing it, man.
Get to the bottom, buddy. All right, guys.
Yeah, have a good week. There's Ed Kratz on Birds 365. Always good to talk to Ed Kratz. He brings a good comedic relief too at times, as well as great information. But he does have that good comedic relief too, which is good. to have on the show. Johnny Mac, wrapping up the week here. Thought we had a good Friday show. I had one little brain fart. I'll blame that on the booze last night. Maybe one too many drink last night. I had a little brain fart.
Yeah, we all
but other than that,
you know, if the president can have a brain fart, you can have a brain fart. So, you know, he has one every day, basically. So
someone hit me with that in the chat. They said, "Don't go Biden on us now, Zander."
Yeah.
I said, "Oh man, that's
Yeah.
not. If I'm getting that in the chat, that's not a good look."
It happens. It happens to me all the time. Hopefully you got a partner that'll step in.
Yeah, you bailed me out, Johnny Mac. I appreciate that.
And by the way, Ed mentions Sydney Brown. Yeah, Sydney's. You know, you need a certain amount of time to let that thing heal from a medical perspective. But I've been saying it all. Sydney's going to be ready, if not week 1, very, very early.
Yeah, so a lot of interesting questions. Ed brought it up. I mean, a lot of questions on this defense. I mean, there's a lot of optimism, there's a lot of potential, there's a lot of upside, but there is a lot of unproven on the defense, and we're going to see.
Oh yeah, a ton of it is. I mean, you know, we all talk about how good the corners are. They're all unproven.
They're all unproven too, right? I mean, Ed went as far as to say that he felt better about that position, but that's another position. They're unproven. I mean, they haven't played a lot of these young guys a significant amount of time in the NFL or really at all, some of them. So we're going to see, you know, how it all plays out. But overall, do you feel better about the defense going into this year than you did at this time?
Oh, yeah. Well, I said from the start, I mean, I do have tremendous respect for Vic Fangio. He's going to get this team, you know, a lot better. They're going to be better prepared, better taught. They're going to buy in, which I think was maybe the bigger problem with Sean Desai, because I don't think teaching was his problem. But I don't know if everybody bought in. They're going to buy in with Vic, more likely. You might have one guy here and there, always, but for the most part, and he's a great you know, he sort of has a great feel for the game. That's what the Eagles keep talking about. He's got this reputation of calling the right thing at the right time, or understanding how to set people up and get a big play in a big situation to maybe get them off the field. I think they're going to be much improved, but, you know, I think there's still some talent issues on the defensive side, as we talked about the uncertainty. But I've said Vic will have them near middle of the road, which will be a big improvement compared to last year when they were in the bottom 5. I think, you know, if they're 15, 16, I think you're fine from a defensive standpoint.
Yeah, I think they're going to get there as well. I mean, I feel good about Vic Fangio. I know we have a lot of unproven guys and a lot of potential that we'll see how it all pans out, but I do feel like we at least have a guy that's going to put them in the best position to succeed, which goes a long way, especially for a young guy in the NFL. So pretty good stuff. That's going to do it for the show, and that's going to do it for the week here on Birds 365. Another good week, 1 week closer to the season. Everybody, it is coming quick. We are just 77 days away. I mentioned it at the start of the show. 77 days away until the Eagles are kicking off the ball in Sao Paulo, Brazil, as we just read.
Sao Paulo, yeah. Sal's going. I was talking to Sal, so he's going to be in Brazil. So
I have a good relationship.
Call it Sao Paulo, Brazil.
I'd like to try and get Sal on the show, Johnny Mac. I have a good relationship with him as well. Just because I've worked with him behind the scenes on one of our other shows in season, and I think he'd be a great guest to have here on Birds 365, a knowledgeable guy.
Oh, very knowledgeable. Sal's a great guy. Yeah, he told me I was trying to get him last year. I forgot about it. So we'll try to get Sal on the show. Yeah, he's a good guy. He's a good guest to have.
Yeah, for sure. Damn, it's Friday. Week flew by. Twiz, it sure did. I want to thank everybody for being here this week, for being here today, and really for all week and for all summer. I mean, you guys have been great all summer long. The numbers in all of our shows are awesome. You guys are keeping it all rocking and rolling, and we appreciate each and every one of you. So thank you guys being here today. Make sure you drop a like on your way out. Looks like we're at 87 likes. Can we get that to 100, everybody? Let's get that up. Hit that like button on your way out. So we appreciate you. Fly Parks, Mike Fittery, Dank, Bird Gang, James Carver, Daz, Twiz, James Jones, our resident Commander fan. Always giving you your shout out, James. CZ, anybody else I missed. I'm sorry for missing you, but I appreciate you, even if I don't mention you. Johnny Mac, good show today. Good week of shows, brother. We'll talk to you on Monday. All right, man.
All right, sounds good. Everybody, stay cool. Have a good weekend.
Stay cool. Have a good weekend. As Johnny Mac said, see you on Monday, everybody.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate inside the locker room and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.